Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So, I just watched Loki season 2. Let's talk about it. Loki is back with a second season. Yeah, the first of the MCU Disney Plus shows to get a second season. We were all very excited after seeing the first season of the show, which for the most part was absolutely brilliant and has emerged as one of the, not only one of the best Marvel Disney Plus shows, but one of the best Marvel projects post Endgame, period. So yeah, I was really looking forward to seeing the second season of this series. And as I sit here, having seen all of season 2, I have conflicted thoughts. Some of you guys may know some of my thoughts because I've commented them, throughout my videos when you guys mentioned Loki season 2. And I think some of us have agreed, throughout the weeks. But then everything changed. Everything changed with that season finale. So now I don't know what to think. Because that season finale, ooh, let me tell you, if the rest of the season was averaging at like a cheeky 7.5, that season finale was a 10 out of 10. That season finale was a straight up 10 out of 10. I can't believe the leap in quality that we got for that final episode. But listen, okay? This is a season review. It's not just an episode 6 recap. So we have to take all of it into account when discussing our thoughts on the second season of Loki. So we'll dive into it in this video, I guess, somehow. But before we do so, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. This week has been a very fun Marvel week, where earlier in the week I posted my deep dive into the issues that are facing the MCU at the moment, particularly from the Marvel Studios side of things and all of the inner workings that's going on over there. So if you haven't checked out that video yet, then I would highly recommend you do so. And to everyone who has checked it out and has engaged with the video and liked it and commented, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate your contributions to it because you guys sent me a bunch of comments and voted in the polls. And so yeah, thank you so much. It's felt like a community project and I really appreciate your input. So yeah, this is part 2 of Marvel Week, and we'll be having part 3 following up very quickly with my review of the Marvels, which yes, I have seen. But beforehand, we need to discuss Loki season 2. So without further ado, let's get to it. So Loki season 2 picks up right where we left off in season 1, with the finale taking place at the end of time, where we have a Kang variant, He Who Remains, who has his own castle or palace at the end of time. At the beginning of season 2, we're introduced to a whole new problem because Sylvie pushed Loki through time, through a time portal, and now he finds himself glitching or time slipping in a way that is very reminiscent to what we usually see from the Spider-Verse films. I do think the Spider-Verse films were an inspiration for that technique, and I find it hilarious that Tom Hiddleston had to just wander around sets doing all sorts of he is so committed to his craft. Listen, we'll talk about Tom Hiddleston in a second, okay? But please, we need to give my man a standing ovation for this role because he knocked it out of the park. It's insane. Anyways, so he had to wander around sets doing all of this practical stuff to mimic the time slipping effect, and it was very effective, although Mobius does say it looks very painful and like he's dying and undying, which is hilarious. But it means that he slips through different timelines because there's great stability across the multiverse at the moment after Sylvie killed He Who Remains. And it turns out he really was the only thing preventing absolute chaos in the multiverse and across these different timelines. So with his sacred timeline, everything was nice and streamlined, and there was only, you know, one option for how things should be. But upon his death, it created a multiverse of madness, I guess. The multiverse still isn't properly explained in phases 4 and 5 of the MCU, but we're not talking about that right now. With this chaos, you know, branches have been created, and Loki is kind of floating through them in this chaotic way due to the time slipping. Now, at first, Loki finds himself in the completely wrong timeline, and it turns out that the cliffhanger that we saw at season 1 was sort of flashback. It was in the past where, you know, there was all this KANG memorabilia lying around. But Loki does his time slipping thing once more, and he finds himself in the proper timeline with Mobius, and they head on down to the bottommost floor to find the only person that they think can help them fix the situation, and that is Quaint's OB. An incredible addition to this cast, an incredible addition to this franchise. I hope they do not waste this man. I hope we see more of him. I hear tales that the TVA may play a role in Deadpool 3, so I hope we see more of OB soon, because he was incredible in this series. One of the bright stars for sure. Anyways, so that's when we're first introduced to OB in the ground floor in his little workshop, and he, you know, tries to help them out as best as he can. You have this sequence where you have Loki flitting back and forth in time because of the time slipping, and so he ends up informing OB of the time slipping, and so in the past and then in the present time, OB has that knowledge because Loki went to the past. It's just so listen, I've always said time travel never makes sense. There's always going to be a paradox. There's always going to be something that just stops making sense at some point, and that very first episode was proof of that. But it was a funny gimmick, okay, seeing Loki jump back and forth across the different timelines as he tried to figure out how to solve this time slipping issue. But in the meantime, you have an even greater problem happening in the background, because there are all of these different branches being created by the second, and the TVA isn't equipped to deal with so many different branches. This is why they were doing all of the pruning, you know, cutting away the branches. There's a lot of leafy, naturalistic imagery used in this metaphor, which all comes to a head in the finale in a most beautiful way. But anyway, we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, that's why they were doing the pruning to begin with, because, you know, as part of He Who Remains' plan, there needed to be one sacred timeline, because otherwise they just wouldn't be able to manage all of the different timelines. Now, the question, the kind of philosophical question of the show has always been, well, why do you need to manage the timelines? You know, like, is it morally correct to do so, ethically correct to do so? Because what about free will? You know, what about allowing people to live the lives that they deserve to live? Well, you know, He Who Remains believes that, you know, they need to stop the emergence of different branches by any means necessary, because otherwise it will give rise to a multiversal war, with a major player being, of course, KANG. He sees that future, he sees that inevitability, but no one else really does. And so there is that question, that moral question of, well, why did you have to prune all of those timelines? Because each of those timelines were trillions of lives, and now they have been lost. Except they haven't anymore, because they're allowed to branch out after the death of He Who Remains. The majority of the series becomes about trying to manage the emergence of these, you know, hundreds, thousands, infinity different branches and timelines that are being created now that He Who Remains isn't there to kind of manage one sacred timeline. And on top of that, you have, of course, Loki and his time slipping. He's going around all over the place, and he eventually learns how to control it and even master it, and master these different tricks across time. And then on top of all of that, we have the typical antics of the TVA. We're reintroduced to our favorite characters like B15, okay? Love to see her back. And of course, Owen Wilson's Mobius, who is a favorite, as well as newcomers like Hunter X5, who's portrayed by Rafael Casal, who's great, as well as General Dox, you know, the general who believes that the TVA functioned best beforehand, and regardless of these new revelations of there being no timekeepers and everything being a myth, she still wants to pursue things the way that they used to, with the pruning and everything, because she believes that is the right way to do things in order to protect the TVA. And of course, we also get the return of Ravonna Renslayer and Miss Minutes, who has a very interesting turn this season. Miss Minutes is crazy. I'm glad that she was reprogrammed by the end of the show, although even still I would be scared to, like, you know, reactivate Miss Minutes, because sis was just booky. She was wiring out, okay? That scene that she had with well, no, Victor Timely, I was gonna say He Who Remains, but Victor Timely, where she was professing her love for He Who Remains, and I mean, I got the sense of that relationship early on, but I was like, are they really gonna do this? Like, is this really about to be? Oh, they went there, like, oh oh, they did do that. Okay, cool, good to know, Miss Minutes. But yeah, it's great to see these characters back. They are really wonderful characters, portrayed brilliantly. And then of course you have the introduction, the main new characters being Obi and Victor Timely, who is another Kang variant, who is from 19th century Chicago. And as part of Ravonna's mission to try and get Victor Timely to become He Who Remains, she gave him the TVA guidebook when he was a child, and that sent him on a different path of inventions, except the inventions don't work because he has the methodology but none of the technology to actually make these things work in his timeline. Our season 2's story all culminates in the season finale, where we see Loki take matters into his own hands. He takes on board everything that he has learned from his peers, from his friends, you know, as well as from his own experiences, and he just tries to figure out this problem, this mathematical equation, and it seems like there's no way to do so without making the ultimate sacrifice, without doing something that even He Who Remains was not able to see coming. And that's when we see him take on the position of the god of time himself. Loki becomes the god of time. He takes the role of He Who Remains, but with a different mindset and a different purpose, and that is to maintain free will, to allow the different branches and the different timelines to exist and to thrive without pruning them, and to basically become sorry, I don't know how to pronounce the word, but the tree of life, the Norse tree of life. You know, he is an encapsulation of that, as we see beautifully illustrated in the finale. So Loki has found his new glorious purpose, right? After 12 years of storytelling for this character, and of course, you know, the last 2 years or however many months it is within the MCU itself, where he's embarked on this new journey, this kind of pivot from 2012 Avengers time to TVA time. And of course that is perfectly demonstrated by the fact that the first episode has the same title as the last. The titles of both the premiere and the finale are just a perfect bookends for Loki's story, for this chapter of his story. And like I said, the finale changed the game. Like I said, we were averaging on a 7 and then it just became 10 out of 10, like out of nowhere. It was crazy. But now that we've dived into the main story of season 2, let's talk about what I think was done really, really well. Okay, the finale. And also the things that I was just like, the reason why I was skeptical, okay, before Friday came along. So first off, I know I was joking a second ago, talking about how the finale was the main thing that was done really well in season 2. 2. But it's kind of not a joke. That finale really was incredible. That finale really was spectacular because it did bring everything together. Because beforehand, I felt like season 2 was kind of getting lost. It felt like it was kind of circling the drain a little bit in terms of this Loom storyline. How do we fix the Loom? You know, what can we do to fix it? The branches are overwhelming. The TVA is going to blow up. And, you know, we'll talk about this more with my critiques of the season, but it just felt a little bit lost and a little bit messy. It didn't quite have the tightness of season 1, but the finale certainly helps just kind of bring everything together. And also it helped refocus the story onto Loki, because as brilliant as these new characters are, both from season 1 and season 2, ultimately the show is called Loki. And I found myself disappointed that, well, I guess I'm talking about the negatives now. I find myself slightly disappointed that we didn't get introduced to more like variants of Loki, for instance, like we did in season 1. I wanted more of that sort of thing, not less, and that's what we ended up getting for season 2. And so when I saw that the series had kind of lost focus from that respect, and just started, you know, to become a bit more of an ensemble piece, which is great. Again, the characters are good, but there's a reason why we wanted the story to be focused on Loki to begin with. It's because he's such an important and brilliant character within the MCU. And with that season finale, that's exactly what happened. Loki manages to get all of the information that he has gained from key characters like OB, like Mobius, like even Renslayer, and he manages to incorporate that into his plan, which is ultimately an act of great sacrifice. And I think that was just such a brilliant way to close off this story, especially if they're not going to do another season, which I don't think they need to. But also, as I said, I think it was a brilliant, wonderful and emotional culmination of 12 years of storytelling for the character of Loki. Talk about a character arc. I don't think there's a single character within the MCU that has an arc quite like Loki's. I mean, I was praising the character arc that James Gunn gave to Rocket Raccoon. I sound crazy. You guys know, you've seen Guardians 3, it's brilliant. So I was already like, oh, this is amazing. Rocket might be the most iconic character in the MCU, blah, 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 blah. But now Loki comes along. Loki comes along and says, what was that, Jean? And just like blew me the fudge away. Again, this is 12 years of storytelling for a character who was the brother, you know, the younger brother of a hero in the MCU, who initially was a villain, one of the best villains of, you know, not just MCU history, but superhero movie history. And then he was starting to become redeemed. You know, there was always this conflict between him and Thor. But in Thor Ragnarok, you saw them working together as a team, and you had hope and you had faith for what their brotherhood could be, especially as they embarked on this new journey in New Asgard, as they were forced out of old Asgard because of Surtur and Hela, until you have this massive ship. You have this huge, ginormous ship, you know, that's captained by a titan, a mad titan who wants to zap half the universe from existence, and Loki is one of the first characters to go. And that was their way of showing you that Thanos meant business, you know, by killing Loki or by snapping his neck, you know, because of course Loki was the big bad in the first Avengers film, but when you see him in Infinity War, he's just like disposable. So it just shows you the level up, right? Which is great for the story, but not great for the character, because he was in a really great position. He was about to turn a new page in his book. But then we fast forward back to Avengers Endgame, back to 2012 Loki, and he has to, you know, kind of catch up on all of that character development, and you see that come to a close with the season finale in the most spectacular way. So really we have various versions of Loki in the MCU, and they've, you know, and unfortunately what's crazy is that each version has a very sad, tragic ending. But at least the version that we've come to know from the series finally managed to find the glorious purpose that he was after. But boy, is it a tragic and lonely experience that he has doomed himself to. It's so brilliant, and it's so poetic and tragic and sad, but what an incredible arc for this character to have gone through, and none of it would have meant anything if we weren't also enraptured by Tom Hiddleston's performance. That's right, I'm giving this man his flowers, okay? Tom Hiddleston just like, oh, iconic, literal icon. Isn't that crazy? He has been delivering phenomenal performances as this character for 12 years now. I want you guys come here. I want you guys to really think about this, okay? Because he could have started coasting. He could have started resting on his laurels, especially because Loki's a TV show and some of these actors don't take TV seriously. They phone it in. And so he could have just been sitting back and like, okay, I know how to do this. Give me the horns, you know, give me the horns, give me the jacket. Let's see what we can do here, and just phone something in, just giving us the bare minimum. And we all would have been gagging anyway. We've been gagging because it's Loki and we love Loki. But no, not a single time, not a single episode did he let up. Like, he was still doing the hair flips. He was still doing that as he was time slipping. And it just shows the dedication and the love for the character that Tom Hiddleston clearly has, because he delivered incredible performances as Loki from the jump all the way until the very end. But thankfully, Tom Hiddleston wasn't the only one who came to work, okay, who came ready every single day on set, because the entire cast here is brilliant. I mean, as I said, you have the return of Owen Wilson's Mobius, who has become Loki's best friend, and I really love the moments where they were just allowed to exist together, where they would just be having these conversations and shooting the shit basically, and it was great because they have such great on-screen chemistry together. They have an amazing friendship and they're absolutely brilliant together. And then you have the addition of OB, who, as I said, is amazing, but we'll talk about him in a second. But when it comes to Mobius, several things come to mind. First of all, we finally got to see him on the jet ski. We finally got to see him on the jet ski. It wasn't as dramatic as we wanted it to be, because us crazy fans were like, oh, maybe he used to like compete on jet skis, like maybe he used to be an Olympic jet ski competitor, like, I don't know, like but we thought it was something crazy, but in reality, you know, he's just selling jet skis in this, like, in the middle of suburbia, and that was fun too, you know, a little bit disappointing considering our imagination, but it was still cute. But then of course you have that second revelation, which is, you know, his life outside of the TVA. This is what Mobius could have, you know, been experiencing all this time, and it's not much, which I think is like, it's really endearing. You know, he's just this like single dad in suburbia who's selling jet skis, and he has these two sons who are like chaotic and making a mess everywhere and he, you know, can't really wrangle them together, but he loves them to death. And I think that's a really sweet kind of story, because like I said, it's not, you know, much, it's not fancy, but obviously it means a lot to him, you know, when he's living that life. And so when you see Loki kind of flash in and try and recruit him, that's when he realizes what he's trying to take Mobius away from, and it kind of is a sobering moment. And I feel like we don't get enough of those moments on the show. Again, we'll talk about that in my critiques, but we don't get enough moments in the different timelines. We get peaks of them, like for instance with Brad, okay, Hunter, X5's persona. You know, we get hints of what the TVA people could be in their own lives, in their own timelines, now that they're branching out. And I think it was important to have those hints because it contextualizes the stakes for us. It allows us to see what's really at stake when they're just looking at the TV screen with all of the different branches branching off. Then we are able to really imagine all of the lives that would be affected with each pruning. And that's why when General Dox, you know, goes on her own little mission to prune as many branches as possible, that's why it's such a huge deal. That's why it's such an Avengers level threat. It's because each and every one of them has a Mobius who's selling jet skis and living with his two sons and just living his regular life. And as I keep saying, another wonderful addition to season 2 of Loki was Ke Huy Kwan's OB. I just love this character, and I really hope that they do more with him. I think he's absolutely phenomenal. Kwan had this great quality to him where he was so sweet and endearing, but he clearly knew his stuff. You know, he wasn't someone to be patronized, but he also had that quirk where he was clearly so out of touch from like humanity for so long, like thousands of years or something. He was just on his own, that he has these mannerisms that are like, oh, like they're a bit mean, they're a bit rude, but you kind of forgive him because he's OV, like he's OV and he's out of touch. So he's just been with his machines for thousands of years. So yeah, what a wonderful character, what a wonderful addition to this world. We'll talk about the world building in a second, but he just fits right in. He was absolutely spectacular. I will say it was hilarious in the episode that we got, I think it was episode 5, where we got to see OB in the real world, and he's like this failed author who's trying to get people to buy his books. That was so sad. That was sad and funny, but he was still incredibly intelligent and like a physicist and everything, and so yeah, he was still able to help Loki out. It's just that he had this side hustle going that he really wanted it to be his main hustle. It was also really great to see the return of Umi Masaku's B15. You guys know I'm a huge fan of hers from Lovecraft Country, so it's always great to see her. I would have liked to see more of her actually. I think there was a little less than I thought there would be, although I would like to see more of the show just in general, because I think 6 episodes wasn't quite enough. Again, we'll talk about it in the critiques. But yeah, I really liked B15, and I liked how she incorporated herself onto the team now that she knows the truth of what's really going on, and it's been revealed that the timekeepers were all just a myth created by He Who Remains to keep people under control. So yeah, realizing that she was a variant herself and that she had a life in the timeline really changed her perspective and got her on board, which I think was wonderful to see. And then we do get that glimpse into her life where she seems to be a doctor, which is wonderful. Like I said, I would have liked to have seen more of her, but she plays a really key role in trying to recalibrate the TVA now that they know the truth about what's really going on with He Who Remains. And finally, when it comes to my favorite characters from season 2, I feel very conflicted about this, guys. I don't know how to tackle this. I don't know how to... But, you know, Victor Timely and all of his variants, they were really great. Listen, Jonathan Majors was really great in this role, I have to say. You know, I mean, there's a reason why we were really excited about him after seeing his work in Last Black Man in San Francisco and Lovecraft Country. Like, I was really keen to see what he would do in this role, and from his work in Loki season 2, you know, we had every reason to be, because he was really great in all 3 or 2 really, 2 roles in this season, as Victor Timely and also as He Who Remains, who comes back in a big way in the finale. Victor Timely is a very endearing character. I think he grated on my nerves just a little bit in that episode. I think it's called 1893, where we're first properly introduced to him in Chicago during that kind of fair where he's trying to sell this version, this like antiquated sort of version of his loom that doesn't really work because the technology isn't available. But yeah, in that episode, I think it was weird and wacky and everything, and his characterization was, you know, he was trying to do something fun and funky with it, I guess. But I don't know if it connected as much in that episode. I think when he was in the TVA and he was interacting with our main cast, especially OB, that kind of humanized him a little bit. I think taking him out of the fun fair environment made him feel more like a real human character, and therefore I think I received it a bit better in that context. And then you have the final episode where Loki has been going back and forth in time for hundreds of years trying to figure out this issue with the temporal loom, and you have Victor constantly volunteering himself to be the one to put the thingy-majig in the thingamabob. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Who cares? And in those moments, Victor becomes very human because he's scared and he's worried and he's, you know, anxious about what's going to happen. He's trying to help and he feels a sense of responsibility for not what he has done, but a variant of himself has done. But he, you know, doesn't know how things are going to work out. This is all very new to him. So in those moments, he becomes more of a human character as well, and that's really welcome. And then you have Majors' reappearance as He Who Remains in the final episode, and it's kind of like a continuation of the conversation that took place in the finale of season 1, this time around from a different angle, because he sees that Loki has done a Doctor Strange and he's gone back in time a million times, and so he has a lot more information than what he did when he first came to the end of time. He seems to be roughly on the same page as He Who Remains now, which makes for a very interesting dynamic between the two, and Jonathan Majors like absolutely sells it in those moments. I mean, he's brilliant, you know, on the show and as the character. But as I said in my, you know, Marvel Problems video, he needs to be recast. Like, what do you want me to do about it? He needs to be recast, and a lot of you guys seem to be on board with that. And I think there are other really great, talented actors who can, you know, do what he's been doing, if not better. And I think the fact that we've seen like 3 or 4 variants of Kang, you know, played by Jonathan Majors at this point, I think that's enough. I think now we can move on to a different appearance, you know, for the character. And with the way that season 2 of Loki ended, it gives us an opening to allow us to introduce a different variant of Kang, because He Who Remains is kind of out of the picture now. And we haven't really dealt with Kang a lot, apart from Quantumania where he dies. So actually we do have an opening, despite what that source said in the Variety article, we do have an opening for a different version of Kang to be portrayed by a different actor here. So I think that's the move that Marvel should make. Okay, so before we dive into some of the issues that I had with the series, let's dive into more of the good. First of all, Natalie Holt. Natalie Holt, okay, who composes the music of Loki. Come here. She's a genius. She like so big brain energy. Natalie Holt's score on the Loki series is the stuff of legend. Like, it truly the stuff of legend. She helped create a legend for the character of Loki through her music. One of the big reasons why that final scene where Loki ascends to his throne at the end of time works so magnificently is because of Natalie Holt's score. The crescendos, the drama, it's just incredible. It gives atmosphere. It's so emotive. It's so brilliant. It drags that emotion out of you. Are you joking? Sis knew what she was doing. She knew what the fuck she was doing. Loki has one of the best theme songs in a TV show ever. I'm trying to think, like, yeah, it has one of the best themes of a TV show ever. In a time when a lot of TV shows are ditching theme songs for whatever reason, Natalie Holt has come out on top. She has come out on top. She is in the ranks of Ludwig Göransson with The Mandalorian. Like, these two contemporary musical composers are just giving us everything, and I'm living for it. So that's number one. Okay, that's number one. Aside from the characters and the brilliant storytelling there, Natalie Holt just is a magician with music. It's incredible. Okay, number two, we have production design, costume design. Just the world of Loki is so brilliant. If you look across the horizon, across all of these Marvel Disney Plus shows that we have gotten in the last 2 years, it's crazy. But there are only a few of them that I felt distinct, that I felt memorable, unique, like they take place in their own little pocket of the MCU. WandaVision, I feel, was one of them because I mean, just necessarily within the hex. It was just its own little bubble within the MCU, literally. And the production design there, the world creation of WandaVision was just so fabulous, that it just felt like its own little thing, and it really stands out to this day. But Loki is definitely another one, because the idea, and this is where we have to give Michael Waldron or someone the credit that's due, the idea of having the TVA be this mid 20th century bureau with this kind of optimistic futurism that it has, that also feels very retro for 2023. I mean, it is just brilliant. The juxtaposition between this very retro setting with the futuristic, you know, sci-fi technology that they're actually using, jumping across different timelines. You have this temporal loom, you know, controlling all of the timelines that are infinitely being created. You know, that juxtaposition is just so brilliant, and it's so clever. And then you have Eric Martin continuing on with the story as the new showrunner for season 2, continuing on with the story and the world building, and doing a really, really great job there too. We have new rooms and new sections of the TVA that we're introduced to, and just the world building overall becomes, you know, a little bit more expansive. We see London in the 1970s, I think it was. We see that McDonald's. Oh, and I still to this day don't know why that McDonald's was so heavily featured, because it low-key, high-key did not need to be a McDonald's. Okay, we'll talk about it. But it didn't really need to be a McDonald's, if we're being frank. But the creation of that retro McDonald's was very convincing, and it fits into the world of Loki really, really well. And so yeah, Eric Martin did a really great job of expanding this world, just making it feel completely unique in the MCU. And finally, since we're still on this love fest, I also wanted to give a shout out to the main directors of this season, and that was Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, who I believe directed all of the episodes, or at least led the team for all of the episodes. But I think they did a really great job. I do think there were some episodes that were stronger than others, but for the most part they did a really great job of bringing this world to life and keeping on track with the storyline for season 2, and in particular the season finale. The season finale, guys, the season finale. Okay, so now that we've gone through all of my positives for season 2 of Loki, it sounds like I adored it, right? It sounds like it was the best thing since sliced bread, right? Well, if you've been paying attention, you'll notice that there were a few omissions when I was talking about the characters and such, and that's for a reason, because I didn't love every single aspect of this series. And like I said, before the finale came around, I was a little bit skeptical of Loki season 2, because I was like, I'm not loving some of the creative decisions that are being made here. So let's talk about them. Firstly, as I mentioned earlier, I think the series is just too short. This 6-episode agenda that Disney Plus has is so annoying, especially when you have these huge stories to tell. It's like, why are you going to restrict yourself to 6 episodes? I think we could have done this in like 8 good episodes where we don't need to rush. We don't need to, you know, skip scenes, okay, jump scenes, so that we don't get to really see what happened, as is the case for, you know, Loki when he's going back and forth in time. There was a lot of skipping stuff, you know, to kind of keep things moving. And it's because they were running out of time, literally. So I wish we could have gotten a few more episodes so that we could really languish in this world as opposed to racing through it. I also think that additional episodes would have helped with what I mentioned earlier, which is being able to actually see the various timelines that, you know, the team was working so hard to save. Because if you're going to make that the emotional crux of the entire season, it would be best for us to experience what they're actually fighting for. We got glimpses through, like I said, Mobius's life and that of Hunter X5, when he was masquerading as this movie star. In that sequence in, I think it was episode 2, right? One of the best sequences of all 2 seasons of Loki, where we finally got to see Loki being his trickster self. Oh, that was brilliant, where he had the shadows behind Hunter X5. And yeah, that was the first inkling of the return of the horns, mind you. But that was such a brilliant scene, and it was so classic Loki, because the Loki that we get in the TVA is very like he's bread and butter Loki. Like, he doesn't have the spice that he used to in the Thor franchise, and certainly not in the first Avengers film. So yeah, he's, you know, very much been mellowed out. But with the beginning of episode 2, we got glimpses of that old Loki that we came to know and love. But anyway, that was one of the few glimpses of the world that they were trying to fight for. Another one was, of course, the McDonald's in Sylvie's land. You know, Sylvie gets herself a job in McDonald's, and that's wonderful, and I'm sure McDonald's paid them a ton of money to do that. But I would have liked to see more. You know, I would have liked to see real worlds that felt substantial and had, you know, emotional depth to them, whereas the worlds that we do get glimpses of are largely empty. The McDonald's is in the middle of nowhere, and we don't really get to see many of the customers. We see that guy who's like the general manager, but, you know, we only see him for a minute and then he disappears. You know, and in the case of London in the 1970s, we only get glimpses of people here and there, but it's mostly Rafael Casal running around in his tux, and like, he looks great. You know, Bradley looks great, but, you know, we don't really get to see or feel the worlds that they're really fighting for. And so when General Dox has this huge mission to prune a bunch of worlds, we get that 2 seconds where it's very upsetting that all of those worlds have been pruned. Like, oh, you know, but it's not the same thing as the snap, where the consequences are really felt across various projects. You know what I mean? Like, it's not the same, it doesn't have the same weight to it, because we have to move on very quickly because it's only a 6-episode show. So even though General Dox's actions actually are on par with Thanos's, because they're not treated as such, it seems very forgettable and sort of a throwaway thing, because we're not really given the time to sit with the consequences of her actions. My next critique of the series may be a function of the fact that it's only 6 episodes long, but I felt like this story had the potential to be bigger than what it was. At first, when they were talking about fixing this Loom, I thought it would be one step towards a greater mission, but it ended up being the whole mission. It ended up being the whole thing. Like, the whole season is, we need to fix this Loom, and like, oh, okay, fine. I guess this is what we're doing for the whole season. It felt like season 1 had a few more sort of facets to it. When it came to the main mission, Mobius was trying to chase after Loki's, but it's because he's a variant. And then the problem of him being a variant is because there's one sacred timeline. And what's one sacred timeline being created by? Oh, it was created by the Timekeepers. But no, the Timekeepers are fake. So who's really behind it? Oh, it's He Who Remains, you know. And in the meantime, Loki gets thrown to that banishment place with a bunch of other Lokis, where we get more variants, and I feel like a lot more happened in season 1, whereas season 2 is really about 2 things, you know, Loki's time slipping and him getting in control of that, and also saving the TVA because the Loom is about to explode, because it can't handle all of the new branches that have been created as a result of He Who Remains being killed by Sylvie. And I just feel like it was a bit more of a contained story. Pre-season finale, which changed everything, mind you, as I said, it kind of felt like the season was an in-betweener. You know, it didn't really feel like there was enough story for a season on its own. And at first, with the season finale, it felt like a mid-season finale where we would get a second half of the season to dive into something more, something bigger. But I guess the something more is going to be the rest of phase 5 of the MCU, which is kind of annoying, because I think Star Wars also has this problem as well, where these Disney Plus shows are feeling like in-betweeners. They're feeling like parts 1B or parts, you know, 2A, 2C, 2DF.71, you know, as is the case with Ahsoka. I didn't actually review Ahsoka on my channel because I was not well enough, but that was my critique of it in my head as I was doing reviews in my head. It just did not feel like a substantial show with enough story on its own. It just felt like an in-betweener to other parts of a story. And unfortunately, Loki season 2 suffers from that same ailment of Disney Plus shows as Ahsoka did, where at least before the finale, it just did not feel like enough story for a whole season of the show. But again, it might be a function of the fact that they know there's only going to be 6 episodes, so there's only so much they can do. But if they were given the same legroom as like Andor, imagine if let's let's imagine, okay, what if, okay, to use Marvel terms, what if Loki season 2 was given the same amount of time, budget, energy as Andor? That would be a game changer. that would oh, and what if they weren't constrained by the fact that Kang has to appear in a movie and not a TV show or whatever? What if they could just do whatever they wanted with this character in the show? It would just be so much more compelling. You would feel like they were really going there. You know what I mean? There would be no restraint. But unfortunately, there is restraint because one, it's only a 6-episode show, and two, this is a TV show. You know, you want Kang to show up in a movie, and you can't explore everything because otherwise, what's left for Phase 5? Next critique of the series would be, I think it lacked a lot of action. There was a lot of people standing around talking. Now, when the actors are so brilliant and charismatic, and when the characters are so iconic, you can kind of forgive the standing around and sitting around talking. But I remember, for instance, in episode, I think 2, where Hunter X5 is, you know, taken to the prison, and Mobius and Loki have that chat with some, you know, neon green pie, some key lime pie. It looks extremely toxic and inedible and just decorative, okay? But they're eating that pie up, and they have a chat, you know, whilst they're eating the pie, and Loki reminisces about, you know, throwing Iron Man out of a window, which is so funny because it happened just yesterday for him. And that was a really cute moment, and I felt like, again, I really enjoy seeing these characters talking together and just shooting the shit, and they have great chemistry together, so that was fine. But then in the very same episode, you have another scene with Mobius just sitting talking, this time to X5, and so to me it was just like there wasn't enough momentum there. So I do wish that they had had more action sequences. Just give us more. I would have liked to have seen more of General Dox's operation, because, you know, when we see what happened, what she did, it's mostly just all done, and you just have the open doors in the middle of some abandoned space. So I would have liked to see more of an action sequence made out of that. So Loki is a really cool character when it comes to action, as we saw at the beginning of episode 2. So more of that would have been definitely welcomed. Although I do appreciate the fact that they rectified one of the issues with season 1, and that was that Loki was wholly depowered, and not just within the TVA, but like he rarely used his powers outside of the TVA as well, where he could. Whereas in season 2, we see him become much more powerful and use his powers a lot more habitually, really reminding us that he is a god after all. And I guess that was the intent, because at the end of the day, he becomes a whole new god, the god of time itself. And my final critique would be against some of the characters, the flip side of the good characters that I enjoyed, the bad ones, the ones I didn't really care for. First of all, Ravonna Renslayer, I just don't care. I'm so sorry to Gugu Mbatha Raw. I mean, she does a decent job in the role. Especially in the third episode, 1893. I thought she was really good there. She was trying to convince Victor Timely to go down her path and become He Who Remains alongside Miss Minutes. That was all fine. But in the end, it didn't really end up mattering because the essence of the story was just about fixing the temporal loom. And so we didn't really have room for her and Miss Minutes' antics. And so she became kind of a useless character for this season. And they do hint towards something at the very end with her character, but again, like, I just don't care. I don't care. What do you want me to do? You've had 2 seasons to make me care about her, and I still don't care. So like, I think it's time to give up. I think it's time to drop it. The second character that I really do not care for, as you might have guessed because I omitted her from the previous lineup of great characters, is Sophie DiMartino's Sylvie. I've never liked Sylvie. I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. I've never liked Sylvie. She just annoys the hell out of me. And oh boy, did I find it annoying when she kept trying to kill He Who Remains as Loki was trapped in this time loop of trying to stop her. And I thought, here's me thinking, you know, that something was going to happen because she kept saying, if you want to get through me, you're going to have to kill me. I thought Loki was going to do that. I thought Loki was going to decide to make the ultimate decision that he needed to kill her so that she wouldn't kill He Who Remains. But you know, he's a transformed character now, and he's lost all of his edge that he had from the Thor films. So of course he's not going to kill her, and also he's in love with her. We'll talk about that in a second, but so boo. So he didn't kill her, and instead he sacrificed himself so that she could work at a McDonald's. That's really upsetting to me personally. But yeah, I've never really liked the character of Sylvie. I'm so sorry. I wanted them to introduce us to other variants of Loki that I could like better. Just any of the variants that we saw in last season when they were in that world, the world outside of time or whatever. Yeah, they would have been better than Sylvie. But no, instead it became about Sylvie, and she kept popping in being upset, like, oh, I hate the TVA, and why are you trying to help the TVA? Which is a valid question, by the way. The idea that Loki's sudden motivation would be to save the TVA was a bit of a lapse in logic for the writers, I guess. I do think there was a bit of information missing to help explain why Loki was so dedicated to saving the TVA all of a sudden. But still, when Sylvie was saying it was annoying as hell. So like, what do you want me to do? Like, when she kept saying it was annoying. It was a valid question, but it was annoying still coming from her mouth. Then you do have the romantic aspects of their relationship, which I think is just a big old flop, a big old boo. I would rather, listen, no one wants to see this because no one wants to see queer representation, whatever, but I would rather see romantic tension between Loki and Mobius than I would between Loki and Sylvie. I think they have less chemistry. They have less on-screen chemistry than Loki and Mobius do, and so I never bought that whole Loki is in love with Sylvie thing. Like, for why? For what? You know, just because she's a woman, a female version of him. Like, Loki's a shapeshifter. He could be a woman anytime that he wants. Anyway, so and he has been in, you know, the comics and in Norse mythology. Anywho, so yeah, I never really bought into that romantic relationship, and so like for me, the stakes with their relationship were just down on the floor, below the ground, below my foundations. So listen guys, overall I enjoyed Loki season 2. I don't think it was quite as strong as season 1, if I'm being honest. At least I didn't. Until that finale. That finale, to me, it's an example of why it's so important to land a finale. It's an example of why what happened to Game of Thrones is so atrocious. Because you can do everything right, but if you flop a finale, it will just leave the most bitter taste in your audience's mouth. Like, it's hard to come back from a flopped finale, as we saw with Game of Thrones. They had to be absolutely pitch perfect for House of the Dragon for us to be back on board again, because we were too badly burnt the first time. But in the case of Loki, we have the reverse situation where I was engaged with season 2 because I love the character so much, and I love this cast and the world that they've created in this retro yet futuristic wonderland that is the TVA. I love all of that, and so I was definitely engaged with the show. But until the season finale came along, it did not feel like something special. It felt like I said, an in-betweener of a season where it was trying to lead up to something bigger, grander, and more consequential in the MCU. But with that season finale, it all changed because it refocused back on the titular character. And with Tom Hiddleston giving the performance of a lifetime, as he has done for the last 12 years, it gave us a culmination of 12 years of storytelling for this character, and it ended in the most beautiful yet tragic yet awe-inspiring way that made me rethink the entire season. And now I'm gonna go back and rewatch seasons 1 and 2 again, aren't I? Yup. That's exactly what I'm gonna do. So with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving Loki season 2 an 8 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Loki season 2, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this season down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.